waiting for Alan to arrive here. Pastor Ted, how are you?
Fine. Thank you for Tuesday.
Oh, you're very
You
welcome.
had a crowd afterwards, so I didn't get a chance to thank you.
Yeah, the food was there. You know, I always think it's about the food. But it was nice to be able to do that, yeah. I'm waiting for you.
Here I am.
So as we get settled, the Old Testament text for this morning, these are the little things that get me excited, which should tell you a great deal about my social life, not much. Which, of course, as you may recall, is from the prophet Amos. And part of my excitement had to do with the fact that this was part of my, this was one of the texts. There was just one, but this was one of the texts that was part of my PhD dissertation. So when I see this, of course, I get very excited. And then, of course, I have to come back to earth. So last time we finished up we could never quite finish up on, of course, on these parables. And as I said to you, there is some kind of discussion, but by and large, we know that there were about 40, maybe 41 parables that Jesus used in his teaching. And we finished up last time on this one, which of course has to do with the idea of the Good Samaritan. And the concept, the very idea of placing the word good in front of Samaritan, in and of itself should tell us what the people thought of with regard to Samaritans, when you have to qualify it as good, okay? Yeah. It's an oxymoron, okay? Sometimes more moron but oxymoron. And as you know, I love language. And over the years as a professor, particularly, I don't get to teach much these days, but particularly as a university professor over the years, I always reminded specifically second-year students at the university, of course, are called sophomores. And I remind them because they're so sort of full of themselves that the word itself means wise fool, okay? Or specifically, wise moron, okay? So before you start elevating yourself to a place of great wisdom, okay, it has two words, wise moron. And by the way, I did have students who literally embodied that word. So Luke 15, which probably, by the way, explains why I don't have many friends anymore. We have three parables here. And as a way of thinking about this, I want to connect it, if you will, a little bit with something else from last time. I have this up here. You recognize, of course, Brother Martin Luther up here. And one of the many things that he said is that we human beings, of course, are simul justus et peccator. Literally, of course, it means we are at the same time, we see everything up here, of course, has given us English words, as you well know, right? Simultaneously saint and sinner. We human beings are simultaneously saint and sinner. We bring to whatever it is that we do these qualities. None of us really enter into the universe of wherever we live purely as saints, right? Or as the philosopher, University of Chicago, her name is Martha Nussbaum, and she now retired, but had two actually. She belonged to two different divisions within the university, law and philosophy. And one of the things that she said is that we human beings are like flawed crystals. Okay? Yes, there is a beauty and a wonder, but also there is, we're not perfect. So we bring who we are to all of this. And so as we think about what it means to be a neighbor, we are not entering that simply because we have perfected the idea. We are constantly in a state of becoming better as human beings, as neighbors. And so as I was thinking about this in connecting with last time, as far as I know, I don't recall a place where Jesus says, I want you to go out and love humanity. Okay? The problem is that it's very easy to love humanity. It's very general, almost to the point of abstract, right? But when we start thinking about loving the neighbor, it gets very particular and very specific. And I was thinking about this, and this, maybe all of us in here, maybe not all of us who are the younger group in here, may remember reading, and I hope you haven't, I hope you will, read The Brothers Karamazov, okay, Dostoevsky. And in that book, which, by the way, this is not bedtime reading, you have to plow through this, all right? But in there, we have this Madame Kokholahov, right, who is kind of a little bit of a, I don't know, let me use an untechnical word, crank, okay? And always has all these questions, and she's always complaining, there's always something, but she wants to serve humanity. And so she has this conversation here with Father Susino. And she says to the priest, I want to serve humanity, help me understand how I can serve humanity. And we have this great scene where he tells her essentially a parable, a story. And it's a story of a person who wants to serve humanity, but sits and have a meal across the table, I'm paraphrasing here, with a stranger. And before you can even get into sort of having that meal, you begin to complain that the person is eating with their mouth open. In other words, serving humanity is great as an abstract idea, becomes much more of a challenge when you have to sit across the table, share a meal, and actually do so in a profound way with a stranger. I mean, I don't know of much else that is challenging while at the same time being profoundly sort of meaningful and human. Without complaining that, you know what, I'm happy to have a meal with you, but, the whole eating with your mouth open, can't do it. So, And then I was thinking about this again during the week, and I don't like to have long text up here, but I thought I would give you this excerpt. And I'll read it. In our era, it is not enough to be tolerant. I know that's very common, by the way, right? It's not enough to be tolerant. You tolerate mosquitoes in the summer, a rattle in the engine, the gray slush that collects on the sidewalk in winter. You tolerate what you would rather not have to deal with and wish would go away. It is no honor to be tolerated. Every spiritual tradition says, love your neighbor as yourself, not tolerate them. And I did some checking, which I knew ahead of time, but I wanted to be sure. I cannot find a single place in Scripture where Jesus says, I want you to go and tolerate your neighbor. And in case you don't take my word for it, I thought you'd see it up on the screen, which now you can believe, of course. Love your neighbor. It is a challenge because the love of neighbor is predicated on multiple things, one of which is, of course, what? Loving the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and then yourself. By the way, the incline here is very steep. It's not easy. And if we only begin with loving ourselves, right? But this is the combination. And there is something profound about this, that it has come to be known as the Great Commandment. Of all the teachings and the healings and in the ministry of Jesus, in some respects, this is what it gets collapsed into. God and neighbor and self. And it's a challenge. And I think it's always been a challenge. And if you don't think it's always been a challenge, you just have to look around today. It is a challenge. It is a challenge. Because there are forces that tell us the love of neighbor, right? Who cares? So then we move into this parable. The parable of the prodigal son. And the homework that you had, of course, last week, and I'm glad to see that you've returned, okay? And I know some of you might say that I don't remember that I asked you to do this homework, but I did. And of course, the homework was, by the way, you know this parable. And that's the good news and the challenge about the stuff that we know. Because we know it so well that what? We don't pay attention to it anymore. It's just part of the landscape, right? I know this stuff. Do you have to repeat this stuff? But we repeat things that are important. We don't go around saying, listen, I want to tell you that I love you, and if I ever change my mind, I'll let you know. Right? And if you're thinking about that, don't. But we repeat things because they're important. And some of us repeat them because, well, then we have to be told, stop. Okay? So the parable of the prodigal son is one of these, right? But this particular chapter in Luke has 3 parables, 2 of which were part of the gospel text from last week. And we did not, sort of have any kind of communication about that. And it's very very well known, and it's kind of like the parable of the mustard seed, very short. But don't judge sort of the core meaning of these parables only on their brevity. Okay? There is substance here. So the first parable, very quickly, it begins, by the way, with the tax collectors and the sinners coming to listen to Jesus. And I have to tell you, I'm not just splitting hairs here, and I'm not just parsing things here. I think there is something much more profound about listening than it is about hearing. Hearing, for me, is kind of an auditory issue. You either could hear or you can't hear. And if you can't hear, we have ways of fixing that. Right? Listening is a whole different story. And we have much more of a problem listening, right? Because many of us, particularly in conversations where there is maybe even a disagreement or some such thing, we are already beginning to think of how we will respond, even before we know the substance of what's being said. Listening is difficult. It's difficult. But they came to listen to Jesus. They came to listen to him. Clearly they had heard prior about this guy going around preaching and teaching, and they want to know more about what he has to say. And the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, this fellow, by the way, not the Lord, not the rabbi, literally the word means, of course, teacher, but this guy, right? This guy welcomes sinners and eats with them. He welcomes sinners and eats with them. And it's very interesting to me, because the idea of eating with a stranger is a profoundly intimate idea. Sharing a meal. There is something that is so deeply moving. I'll give you an example. Every now and again, I know Pastor Roy alluded to this morning. Every now and again, maybe with some regularity, I hear from students from, a year gone by, occasionally 5 years ago, or whatever the case might be. And it is because there was a moment that triggered a memory. And this particular student who wrote to me said, and I did not know about this, said that she was in the Peace Corps, and she was in Arusha, Tanzania, in the Peace Corps. And she was teaching in an elementary school, a boys' school, all boys. And she sent a picture. And she said, I thought about something way back when that you mentioned in class and on a couple of different occasions. And I was intrigued because, of course, who remembers this stuff? And she said one day, one of these boys in the class said to her that his mom would like to invite her to dinner. She said, the area in which I teach is very, very, very poor. Very poor. And she said, I really had to think about this because on the one hand, I want to be sure that this meal would not set back this family. On the other hand, I can't very well say no. Think what that would do. And she said, I went. And of course, it was simple, but they're deeply meaningful as they did everything to make this teacher welcome. And she said, I remember you saying on more than one occasion, the intimacy of sharing a meal with a stranger, with an outsider, going out of the margins in which we find ourselves on a daily basis being comfortable. It matters. But those of us who are steeped in the tradition that says this is the only way it should be, get very put off when others are attended to, who are not like us, who are different, who have socioeconomic environment that does not live up to what we believe, that sort of thing, who look differently, who speak differently. And what Jesus does not do here is to say, can I check to see what you believe first before? No. What Jesus does not do, as we talked last time, In the healing of the 10, you remember? Jesus does not say, "Are you all Jews?" No. It turns out it was the Samaritan who came back to give thanks. You may recall in that parable that the person who was beaten and left for dead, according to the text, on the road, what do we know about his identity? We don't know. We don't know. It never says that he's Jewish. It never says anything. He is face down, and that's the whole point, isn't it? That it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And the question is not, I'm going to go out and look to see who is my neighbor to help. The issue is, who as a human being will you be a neighbor to? Who will you be a neighbor to? I mean, think of the Amos text. Very, very difficult. Will you be a neighbor to the oppressed? Will you be a neighbor to the prisoner? Will you be a neighbor to those who are hungry or to those who are homeless? It's a challenge. And Jesus collapses the walls and boundaries by hanging around with very unsavory people, sinners. And by the way, Jesus doesn't describe them as sinners. That's kind of like, the category in which they have been placed, right? But who among us is not a sinner? I mean, who among us? And by the way, if we are even tempted to believe, then most of our liturgy is farcical. Because all of that confessional stuff about forgive us our sins, all of this absolution, right, is a joke. But we acknowledge that on a daily basis, right, we sin. And so he told them in this parable, if you have 100 sheep and losing one of them, who would not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulder and rejoices. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors and says to them, rejoice with me, for I have found my lost sheep. Just so I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than 99 righteous person who need no repentance. But for the custodians of the Torah, namely the Pharisees, the one who are custodians of the sacred text, said, we can't have this. We have to have certain parameters to decide who deserves this and who doesn't. And you just don't, because you're a sinner. But the Gospel of Luke, one of the guiding principles in the Gospel of Luke is that he emphasizes the importance of unconditional love. That's a tough one, right? And we, not us in this room, but as a society writ large, we are far too comfortable with this kind of quid pro quo. If you love me, then. There is no if you love me, then. Love, in the Gospel of Luke, and by definition, what we have inherited, should have a period, not a comma. That's it. Love one another, period. Unconditional love, period. That's difficult. Because we have gotten into the business of, that love becomes transactional. And Jesus wants no part of a transactional love. And so there is rejoicing. Luke 15 with these parables are parables of joy, parables of celebration with friends and with neighbors, right? You don't only get the lost sheep and you go home and then you have a little lecture to the sheep. Listen, in the future, don't leave the rest. No, you go home and you celebrate with your neighbors. That's what you do. But what happens when the religious folks put blinders on grace? Grace belongs just to us. That's it. Not to those people out there, beyond what we have constructed as the boundaries. Imagine, we will decide who deserves grace and who doesn't. We decide this. And by the way, I know, I mean, Jesus loves everyone, but he would not understand today. Yeah. Who belongs and who doesn't? So one is lost, 99 in the wilderness. Are we, not us in this room because we're enlightened, but folks out there, right, have a way of thinking that we romanticize this stuff. You have just left 99 sheep in the wilderness. We're not told that there is an assistant shepherd here. I don't even know if that's a thing, okay? Or a deputy shepherd. You've left them out there. And if you don't believe that, imagine the risk that involves. And yet, within the Bible, both Hebrew and Greek, both Old and New Testaments, repeatedly we see the wilderness being used as a place, right? Again and again. And it is no accident that it is used as a place of transformation. So, it's a place of danger, it's a place of difficulty, it's a place of barrenness, it's a place of death. Let's be very clear. We can romanticize this until the cows come home. The sheep come home. And I knew it didn't sound right immediately. Right? But pause. This is difficult. This is difficult. And so is this. David, I'm not sure what's going on here. Maybe sometimes you begin speaking about these things and it doesn't want you to move on, so maybe it's the battery.
We'll get some more. You can use the computer too. We'll get some.
It does say the battery is running low, and I think that might be a reference to me rather than the pointer. And people have told me that my battery is running low.
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
No.
Thanks for the support.
Shall I put this for it?
Pardon?
Shall I give you an illustration?
You may give me an illustration.
Roland, my husband, would go to the jail and visit prisoners there. Wherever we lived, he went to a different jail. And one time, I don't know if I even knew he was going to the jail that day, but anyway, he called me and he said, I'm here at the jail, but Charles is just getting out. I'm going to bring him for supper. I said, okay, no problem. So Charles, the prisoner, came out and he had dinner with us. That was just okay with me. Charles was back in prison again in about 5 or 6 months.
But maybe it's a good thing that our actions today do not always imagine what tomorrow is going to be sort of negatively. If we did, right?
Like planting a seed. Like planting a seed.
Yeah, if we did. There's much has been written that we do not want to walk away when we see an acorn because we cannot imagine what it could be. But at the same time, we don't want to look at an oak tree and forget that it came from humble beginnings as well. So holding these things in tension, and it is it's difficult, but let's be honest, okay? And this time I want you to show up a show of hands here. Who among us is ready, willing, routinely, no questions asked, on the highway stop and pick up a hitchhiker?
Not anymore.
So why not? By the way, let me be very clear, okay? I'm not saying, well, I'm glad I do it all the time. No, our society has dictated, right? We have arrived at a place where maybe that idea, quaint as it sounds today, was routine. I don't know if you read, do you have, I'm giving away trade secrets there, I probably shouldn't. Does anyone read Lee Child's novels? Lee Child's. Okay? He writes novels and the main character is Reacher. Okay? It's not a person you want to mess with. And he only travels by hitchhiking. I would not pick up Jack Reacher on the highway. He is 6'4", 250 pounds with scars all over, and he's standing there. It works, okay? But we don't anymore.
Teenage girl would be a different story.
Maybe, okay? Maybe. That has all the marks of disaster waiting to happen there as well. Okay, so, by the way, I know Pastor Jan is leaving. It was not something that I said. He told me ahead of time. So. Because every time you leave, I assume it's something that I said. So here is the thing. I put this up here just as an example of Jesus is tempted where? In the wilderness. Because it's barren. There is nothing. You don't step out and grab a loaf of bread when you are, right? It's there. This is the challenge. We are challenged in moments.
That's a challenge.
I'm not touching anything anymore. Okay. Every time I begin these and continue these discussions, and then I look out and the sky darkens and there's the thunder, people begin to move away from where I am, just in case the lightning strikes. As this comes back, Jesus is in the wilderness. There is a reason for that. This is a difficult environment when you are being tempted, and temptation only works when there is something about which you're being tempted that actually has something of value to it. So if I am tempted and I am hungry, a loaf of bread seems like a gift. Or if I'm powerless and I'm tempted with power, that's something. Or if I'm penniless and I'm tempted with wealth. The wilderness has a way of doing that. But we also see in the wilderness other moments. For example, the story, as we wait for this, the story of Sarah and Abraham and Hagar. And you may remember, right, that Sarah kicks Hagar out of the house. I do not want this woman and her son. By the way, whose idea was this to begin with? Never mind that, right? And where do they go? In the wilderness. And when the water sort of is gone, what happens? We are told in this dramatic, painful, difficult moment in the text that Hagar decided to move away at a distance from her son because I could not bear to see the fact that he might die of thirst and hunger in the wilderness. And it is in that moment that God appears and provides and grants this promise, similar to what Mary in the New Testament is granted, that you will have a son who will be wild, and it goes on. But it's in the wilderness. Or let's go to the prophets. In the book of Hosea, and I don't know how much you know about the book of Hosea, and if you've been curling up reading the book of Hosea, please get out and have a life. The book of Hosea is also difficult. It's one of the rare books where scholars believe that the story that is being told actually parallels a story that might have occurred. So it's not just a story. And it's about a person who is married to Gomer, who happens to be a prostitute. It's not the all-American love story here. And by the time we get to chapter 2, right? And by the way, the language is, I have to say, very brutal in the book. It's language that we do not use in everyday conversation, and therefore I will not use here. And yet, it's in the Bible. And at the end of that first episode, what are we told? We are told that God will woo. That's not a word we use anymore, right? Court. I mean, who uses that word, right? Courtship. It's so quaint. But that's the word. God will court. God will woo the people again. And in that moment, God will create a new relationship, a new covenant with them. And it will be based on all of the qualities of creation once more. It's beautiful. And where does that take place? In the wilderness. I will take you in the wilderness when I renew this. And it's dramatic because, of course, I'm taking you away from all of the distractions. And it's in that context I will have a new relationship with you. Beautiful, painful, beautiful. Or where does God create and bring about, if you will, a people with Moses? In the wilderness. So I'm saying all of this in part because, of course, wilderness idea, as difficult as it is very much a part of the biblical idea of newness, if you will. One of the great things about having PowerPoints and all of that, which I've never used, by the way, is the idea that I still have my notes. If you have not read the book that I referred to a moment ago, it's just one word, easy to remember, Cast. Okay? C-A-S-T-E, Cast. And it's by Isabel Wilkerson. Okay? Isabel Wilkerson. Same last name. Has no relation, right? Different Isabel Wilkerson. And it's said Cast. And it's a profound piece of research, right? And in there she talks about this idea. So what do we do here as we look to this parable with the prodigal son? When you lose something, as is the case with the sheep, right? You make a choice. Is this one so valuable that I'm willing to take a risk? Or, in the case of the lost coin, by the way, you and I might say, I mean, you know, we walk around, do you stop and pick up pennies? I mean, you know, kind of. And what's a penny? Frankly, what's a quarter? Frankie, what's the time? And yet, the woman who loses that coin does everything to find it. And when she does, I always chuckle at this, because when she does, what does she do? She celebrates, right? Yeah, she pays more than the coin, likely, right? But that's not the point. It's the point of joy and celebration. And it's the point of not abandoning something of value. Jesus is simply not going to abandon anyone who we as a society have determined is not of value. Not like us. So out of pain and loss, and as I was thinking about this, I thought of the Psalm 30. And you may remember this psalm. It's well known. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. For every moment we lose something, it is weeping into the night. For a lost sheep, for a lost coin, for a person who has walked away for whatever reason. And those moments are moments of darkness, moments of night. But joy comes in the morning in part because, as difficult as it is, the darkness may last for a while, but it might not likely last forever. And do we have the courage for the morning? That's the question. To wait for the light, for it to come. So we look at the parable of the prodigal son. And as I was thinking about this, and I've mentioned this before, I think it was last spring, that these texts in Hebrew and in Greek, and I hope some of you will, in time, feel a kind of urge to study it in the original languages. But if you do, you will discover very quickly as you learn these languages, and then as you begin to look at the text, let's say in Hebrew and in Greek, they just keep going. They just keep going. And if it's difficult and confusing enough to read this from left to right and from front to back, in Hebrew, of course, it's what? From right to left. And from what we determine, the back to front. And there's no punctuation. There are no verses. There are no paragraphs. And in the case of Hebrew, in the original, there are no vowels. So, best wishes to you. Later on, vowels were added, okay? And it was vocalized. I'm saying all of that because in the original, there is no such title as the prodigal son, right? I put these two up here because these are, one is ancient and one is modern. And in the Vulgate, what is called the Vulgate, which is the Latin translation of the text, of the biblical text, okay? This is the title that it's given even in the ancient writings, okay? The Folio Prodigo. Literally, as you can see, right? The prodigal son. And then in German, which is a little bit more, nuanced, and the meaning would be something like the forlorn or the lost son, right? As opposed to the prodigal son. Okay? And it changes the manner in which we think about it.
How much do you think that how we title these parables, which don't have a title, how much do you think that affects the way we interpret it?
Oh, if I don't, I'm always careful to say 100% about practically anything, Okay? But this is right up there, right? It shapes the manner in which we think about this. I mean, when you hear about this story, do you not think about this as the prodigal son? Yes. But is that son a prodigal son? And I'm not saying that because I'm the youngest and I'm not a prodigal son. I'm saying that because is that a prodigal son? And does the word prodigal only applies to him in this story? Why not apply the word prodigal to the father? Because, of course, the word also means prodigious, right? I mean, I hope all of us have children. I know there are two young people here. And maybe both of you are prodigies. Okay? She's looking at me like, I wonder who told him that. Only her family knew that she was a prodigy. Now I do. Okay? But actually, it's a positive thing, right? With its challenges, because if you're a prodigy, you could be also set apart from the community. But it can be a positive thing. But we have determined that the issue here has to do with the son who left. So, how does the story begin? The story, I have to tell you, is about the father. When we begin a narrative that says, I have two sons, who do you think it's going to be about? I'm telling you about my story. A father has two sons, and we are told that the younger took his portion, he packs his bag, the story is very straight, and he leaves. We are told that the inheritance is divided, right? Equally, right? Thanks for playing. No. It never says that. What we do know from that context is that the older son is likely to have 2/3 of that property. Okay? All the text says that it was divided. It doesn't say anything but equally. And we are told his share, his portion was given. I know we collapse this to think that, how could you give away half of the, but actually that's not true. But he takes his stuff, there is no goodbye, there is no interaction, there is no, I'm not saying it didn't happen, the text does not say. There is no embracing of a father to the son, and as we will discover with the brother, whatever else we may think, we don't have a sense of the fraternal bonding here. And so the son who wants to leave focuses on all of the material resources. Give to me that which belongs to me. It's kind of an audacious statement to make. And couldn't you just see the father says, excuse me here, Huckleberry, it doesn't belong to you. But that's not part of it. Give me what belongs to me. That's the tradition. And there is a point, and it's a good reminder, that material resources, as abundant as they may appear to be, nonetheless are never infinite. And so let me